is, and I quote, "going where the silence is, giving a voice to those who've been forgotten, forsaken, and beaten down by the powerful." She suggests that the media today have largely ignored this responsibility. Amy Goodman has not. Her determination to give people a voice has taken her to some of the globe's most dangerous places. Reporting on the U.S.-backed Indonesian occupation in East Timor, she and a colleague witnessed a massacre of civilians by Indonesian troops and were themselves brutally beaten. But they filled the silence. Their documentary, Massacre, The Story of East Timor, won numerous prizes, including the Robert F. Kennedy Prize for International Reporting and the Alfred I. duPont-Columbia Silver Baton. In 1998, she reported from Nigeria on the exploitation of its people by Chevron Oil and the country's dictatorship. Her work culminated in the award-winning radio documentary, Drilling and Killing, Chevron and Nigeria's Oil Dictatorship. The Washington Post calls Goodman, and I quote, "a reporter who sinks her teeth in and never lets go." Her fierce and always independent voice can be heard regularly on Democracy Now!, the Pacifica radio show she hosts and helped launch nearly a decade ago on New York's WBAI. Welcome to the Cambridge Forum, Amy Goodman.
Okay. Well, it's a great honor to be here, and to be here with my brother and co-author David Goodman, to be here with Noam, to be here with my family, my mom, Dari Goodman, my brother, Dan Goodman, and my sister-in-law, Sue Minter, and so many of you who, like so many people around the country, are deeply concerned about what's taking place today. I come from Pacifica Radio, which was founded 55 years ago this past week, founded by a man named Lou Hill, who was a World War II conscientious objector. When he came out of the detention camps, he said, there has to be a media outlet that is run by journalists and artists and not corporations that profit from war. And so Pacifica was born, not run by corporations that George Gerbner, founder of the Cultural Environment Movement, said, corporations that have nothing to tell and everything to sell that are raising our children today. KPFA was the first Pacifica station. Founded in Berkeley, California in 1949. April 15th, 1949 at 3 o'clock, Lou Hill went on the air and welcomed people to the airwaves of KPFA. This year, as David and I go around the country celebrating community media that is the exception to the rulers, like WZBC from Brooklyn College that broadcasts Democracy Now!, and Boston College, and CCTV, Cambridge Community Television, and Newton Community Television as well, and maybe some of you can shout out the different TV stations or radio stations that you honor and also that broadcast Democracy Now! We were at 3 o'clock on April 15th at Prison Radio Project in San Francisco. That was the exact moment that KPFA went on the air 55 years ago. A young Fresno Bee reporter had asked me what I would be doing at that moment on that day this year. Well, the phone rang and I picked it up. There was a recording warning me that I was about to speak to a prisoner. And then the familiar words on a move. It was Mumia Abu-Jamal from death row in Pennsylvania. We had a 15-minute conversation. Every few minutes it was interrupted by the tape recording, warning me that it was a prisoner and I could hang up if I wanted to. And at the end of the 15 minutes, the phone went dead. That was his allotted time. Yes, Mumia Abu-Jamal is on death row, found guilty of a crime he says he is innocent of. I can't think of a more fitting way to observe Pacifica Radio's anniversary than to go to where the silence is, where so many are being held now. 2 million people in prison in this country, the largest prison population in the world, and on death row, thousands of people. We are so used to hearing the small group of pundits on television who know so little about so much pontificate on every issue. But it's our role as journalists to go as close to the story as possible, to bring you people describing their experiences for themselves. And so when we talk about prisons, let's hear from prisoners. When we talk about one of the most controversial policies in this country, that is the death penalty, let's hear from people on death row. Mumia Abu-Jamal doesn't talk about his own case. He talks about the situation of people in prison. He talks about the irony of father hunger, that so many young men in prison don't know their fathers, and here he is, a father and grandfather, a father figure to them. He can't be that to his own children. He talks about capital punishment being punishment for those without capital. And those are the kind of commentaries he offers us. Pacifica Radio is invaluable because it is a sanctuary for dissent, what all media should be in this country. After KPFA went on the air from Berkeley, KPFK in Los Angeles, and then WBAI in New York, WPFW in Washington, D.C., and KPFT in Houston, Texas, on the air in 1970. The only radio station in the country in its first year of operation, its transmitter was blown up twice by the Ku Klux Klan. And when the Exalted Cyclops, or was it the Grand Dragon, I often confuse them, went on trial, he said it was his proudest act because he understood how dangerous Pacifica Radio is. Dangerous because it allows people to speak for themselves. And when you hear someone speaking from their own experience, that breaks down the stereotypes and the caricatures that fuel the bigotry, that feed hate groups like the KKK. In the 1950s, the great singer, actor, intellectual, scholar, activist, Paul Robeson, was whitelisted from almost every place, public place in this country, but a few black churches. But he could be heard on KPFA. Then James Baldwin, the great civil rights activist and writer, debating Malcolm X in the early 1960s on the effectiveness of nonviolent civil disobedience, the lunch counter sit-ins in the South, broadcast over the airwaves of WBAI. Yes, it is so important we have a forum in this country where people can speak and people can listen and hear people form a thought, actually give a speech, hear someone critically think, develop a thought that might be different from others from beginning to end, and break this soundbite culture, 8 or 9 seconds, where the only thing you can repeat is the accepted non-wisdom, the establishment consensus. I have a lot of hope because media activism is on the rise. Yes, the networks are using public property. NBC, CBS, ABC. It's not just Pacifica or NPR or PBS that are using the public airwaves. They are too. And they have a responsibility, despite the fact that during the Persian Gulf War, CBS was owned by Westinghouse, NBC was owned by General Electric, 2 of the major nuclear weapons manufacturers, making most of the parts for most of the weapons in the Persian Gulf War. What they presented looked like a military hardware show. Despite the fact these corporations are using these airwaves, they are not theirs. And we can reclaim them, or we can demand that they use them responsibly. I often tell a quick story about my experience during the Persian Gulf War. One night on WBAI after the news, it was during fundraising, and I was railing against the bombing of the cradle of civilization, Back to the Cradle. And a volunteer ran in who was taking phone calls, and she said, the Sally Jesse Raphael show is on the line. And I said, right. And I just kept on going. She said, no, really, really. And she kept coming in. And volunteers are the heart of every community radio station. I just thought this one was hallucinating. So because she kept interrupting, I said, okay, give me the phone. I picked it up, and sure enough, she was right. And there was a producer from the Sally Jesse Raphael show. She said she had been listening in her limousine. I guess her chauffeur had turned on the program. And she wanted to know if I'd like to come on the show in 2 days. They wanted to have a panel discussion about the war, 3 women for and against the war. I said, sure. And I, thought about what to wear, this big, women's talk show that millions of women watch, and whether to dress as a man, dressed as a woman, dressed as a man, dressed as a woman. But I decided, I figured it out, and I went on down. And they kept the 2 groups, the anti and pro women, in 2 different green rooms because they said they wanted us to duke it out on the stage and only meet then. That's where the fireworks would be. And actually, this producer I thought was onto something. She said, I am so sick and tired of these programs, these sensational shows that so many people watch. I want to prove we can get the ratings on an issue that matters. And I said, that's a very good idea. So we went out on the stage, and the lights went on, music went up. Sally came out, and she immediately gave the mic to someone in the audience who said, I'm really concerned about the biological and chemical weapons of Saddam Hussein. And the woman sitting next to me, named Dr. Yolanda Hewitt-Vaughn, an Army captain who was trained as a doctor, and she was refusing to go to the Gulf. She said she was trained to save lives and not take them. She responded. She said, I share your concern, but I also think it's important to know that there are chemical and biological weapons right here in the United States. And before she could get out the word states, Sally whirled around. She came barreling down the aisle, and she was shouting, you be quiet, you shut up, this is my show, or you get out. Now, I hadn't seen this show very much, but I remembered what this young producer had said about, I want you to get out there and duke it out. And she was coming down with such velocity, I thought she was going to strike Dr. Yolanda Hewitt-Vaughn. And so as she is coming up on the stage, I said, whoa, Sally, back off. Now, they had told us to bring our friends with us, and I brought a bunch of people from WBAI, so they started to chant, free speech, free speech. You can dress them up, but you can't take them anywhere. So anyway, Sally started to break down. Her producers came out, they were rocking her back and forth, and they were saying, it's okay, Sally, it's okay. It was the one moment of unity for the 6 women on the stage who disagreed on every other issue. But we looked in shock, and it really was as if she had never heard an anti-war point of view. Somehow the producers convinced her to carry on with the taping of the program. And we went on. And she showed videotape of protesters in Washington, and she asked me, who are these people? I know, I didn't know everyone's name, but I said, these are people engaged in their patriotic duty, what they think it is, and they're going out into the streets. Now, I said, I applaud you for not just showing the images of the protests, which is the best we can expect from the rest of the media. And most people don't identify with 10 or 100,000 people marching in the streets. It's rather alienating, I think, to most Americans. But why do they do it? Well, they're not invited into a corporate network studio to explain in a civilized way, say like Henry Kissinger is invited, to explain why he supports every invasion. No, they have to gather together, and remember the Persian Gulf War, the middle of winter, freezing cold, leaving the warmth of their home and their families and their TV sets, coming down to Washington. And they can only hope that on a global warming day, a CBS executive might open their window, and that chant of no war will waft in and hit an open microphone. But I really said to Sally, you've gone beyond, and you're having a discussion, and I applaud you for that. And we kept on going. Had talked about a lot of things. I said, as the granddaughter of an Orthodox rabbi, it horrifies me to see little Israeli children with gas masks, but it's more horrifying to see little Palestinian children without gas masks. And that's the kind of conversation that we had. My grandfather isn't alive today. He died about 10 years ago at the age of 94.